transform it into a non-chemical regenerative plant-based diet, all which is possible. But we can't do that unless there is some kind of a revolution. And the revolution has to be based on something gentle, and it has to come from the ground up, because the leaders are not going to make any changes. They absolutely can't. So we have to make the changes, and that will force them to change. And it's very difficult to be the black sheep in your family and stand up and say, hang on for a second. But that's actually what we all have to do. Hang on for a second, lads. You know, we have about 10 years before everything falls apart. So we're in a massive crisis. And because people are looking out their windows and seeing a lovely sunny day, hearing some birds singing, they probably think everything's okay. But when was the last time you had to clean the insects off your car screen? When was the last time you opened your window at night and the light in the room attracted a flurry of moths into the room? If we keep pouring chemicals on the earth, we're going to kill all the earthworms, which are being wiped out. Their immune systems are depleted because they're getting attacked by invasive species. All of these things are causing huge ecological crisis. Without earthworms, we have about a year before we're wiped off the face of the earth. We depend on these creatures. Without bees, we're 4 years before we're wiped out. We actually need to look at these creatures as our gods almost. It's a wrong term. I don't want to make it religious because it's not. I just mean we need to be in service to nature. This is where we've gone wrong. For millennia, we lived in service to nature, and we understood that all life had massive consciousness and felt pain and joy. All the creatures that we live with, they're just as conscious and feeling as we are, including the rooted creatures, the plants, the trees. And we have to kill life to survive here. And it's a very painful reality. But if we accept that that's the truth and then become responsible and use gratitude and be of service in return, then everything comes back into balance.
So should we be growing food on our own plots?
Yes. I'm saying to people that in order to change the system, we have to step out of the industrial fishing and farming system, which is killing the planet, because that's basically what is killing the planet. We have to grow resilient local communities where we live in walkable communities where you can grow your own food or grow community food or support local organic farming communities, and stop buying stuff basically, and stop needing to jump on a plane to travel to get away from your life. We have to grow our own food because the system of food growing is in a major way responsible for the planet dying around us. So I'm saying to people, if they can, give half of it back to nature and use the other half to grow food and have a little bit of space for you and your family to hang out.
A lot of people nowadays are living in more urban areas and cities. If they don't have ownership or guardianship over a piece of land, what can they do?
So I'm asking people a couple of different things. One is they can get together as communities and try and raise money to buy land to create arks. If they can't manage that, if they can't buy land, certainly in smaller villages and towns, they can do that. They can go to farmers and buy land to create arks, half wild, half food growing for local communities, you know. In larger cities, you can go to your local councils, your local governments. They have so much land that is just wasteland. Just ask them. I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of asking, can we please take some of this land back? Can we take it and create community gardens, you know, sanctuaries for nature? Go to your local parks. There's so many areas of parks. There is absolutely no need for them to be maintained. They could ask the parks to put up signs saying this is an ark, and you give at least half of it back to nature. Look at your railway, all the railway lines all along the edges, they need to become arks. The sides of roads, all those industrial brownfield sites. You know, if you go to your schools, all the green mown spaces in between everything, there's no need for them. They can be places for families to live, you know, rooted and unrooted creatures.
I did read on your website as well something that I thought was quite interesting, especially for people who are gardeners already. And that was about buying plants in to put into your garden. And you talk about sourcing plants that aren't treated with chemicals. So where would we start to look to do that? And what are the problems that are caused by buying in plants that have been treated in that way?
The problems are that a lot of plants are exempt from the neonicotinoid bans in the world of gardening. They have been treated with different chemicals, fungicides, herbicides, and pesticides. Basically, it's how they create a massive amount of one type of plant in one area, and the seeds themselves have often been treated. They're systemic and persistent, and they travel throughout the life cycle of the plant into the pollen stage, which then, when insects come along, they get hurt because they're collecting pollen which has the pesticide trace in it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no need to buy in plants, is what I'm saying. People say, what can I plant for my ark? And I'm like, okay, well, you need to go to the website and read the very simple steps involved, because there's no need to plant anything. Planting things, if you understand ecology, which, I barely have an understanding of ecology, so I'm not saying I'm an expert on this, but I understand that if you allow the native seed bank to emerge from the earth, they're the plants that support the local genetic diversity of the insects. They partner with plants. The weeds are the ones that they actually need. They're the ones they need for creating habitat for laying their eggs or for food, or the pollen, the genetic imprint of the different pollens, local plants, is what they thrive on. So if you bring in garden centre plants, yes, they will do well on some of them, but they're not thriving, they're surviving. That's a very different thing. And what we need to do is stop thinking we know best. There's no need to buy anything. You just have to allow the native seed bank to emerge from the earth, mm-hmm. and stop thinking that we know better.
That's going to be an uphill struggle, I imagine.
Well, it isn't when you start to see what happens. Like almost overnight, all this life comes back in, and it's so empowering and it's so beautiful, and it's just every single creature that arrives back in, you just feel a sense of, it's like you're not doing it for yourself, but we are doing it for our own survival. But it's just incredible. And there's such a wonderful feeling that comes with finding a family of hedgehogs, seeing all these weird and wonderful insects suddenly, or seeing all the birds collecting the amount of insects that they can collect in an ark as opposed to a garden to feed their babies at the moment, Mm-hmm. My friend Claire and Joe, they have a forest garden based on one of the gardens from the Garden Awakening book. They also have an ark, and you can follow them on Instagram at Irish Forest Garden, and you can see this incredible little bird box they have, which has a camera in it. We've been watching these birds go from nesting stage up to, they have now their young are getting fed in the nest. It's like the most compelling television. Initially, I was just absolutely terrified because the amount of food they need to keep going to get to feed these little creatures, like their voracious appetites. I don't know about you, but there's such a lack of insects. I mean, we've lost 75% of the population in the last, 25 years. That's not getting better because the government isn't making any changes. Policy isn't changing. Like, they're still pouring pesticides everywhere. Nothing is going to survive. But these creatures in Claire's garden, because it's an ark, they're getting so much food. And it's very heartening to see that this happened. And it's really exciting. And it really enriches your life. I talk about that in the Garden Awakening book, about how your land is a direct reflection of your own health, mental, physical, emotional. And so if you're nurturing your land, you're giving attention to things within yourself that need nurturing. And it has a huge impact. So it isn't an uphill struggle when you see the impact it has very, very quickly, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So eventually, if I, say, took a portion of my garden and let it just go back to nature, it would, where I am, become oak woodland. And is that the idea, to just let it become what it wants to be? Yeah.
There's words for it, wilding, rewilding. And that is the idea. But you have to also understand there's a couple of things. Because we've damaged the web of life so much, we have to step in and provide ecosystem services, basically, for the creatures that are now missing from the web of life. So you don't want it to become a dark, heavy, full-growth woodland where nothing lives underneath it,
Yeah.
And in small gardens, you're never going to get to that stage anyway. But what you can do is allow one tree in there at least one tree, preferably an oak in our climate. It's like the top of the chain, like we're the top of the chain, in the plant world. It's different all over the world, of course, but that is the thing. But also at the beginning stages, because we've damaged the land so much, we might need to reboot it. So some land is poisoned or compacted to a point where we have to remove what's there. And so a locally sourced organic native wildflower meadow or a mix of local weed seeds that you've collected yourself and throw them in and allow them to come up. And once they get a start, everything else will find its way in there.
So there is an element of management. It's just having to be very careful about what you're doing and mindful of your surroundings. Yeah.
For example, invasive plants are going to be a major issue. And I don't like the term invasive plants. They're opportunistic. We've brought them here. It's our fault. But they're all very different all over the world. And it becomes a serious problem on a large scale. But the beauty of the ARK project is that on a small scale, if you've got some land, a garden, a small garden or a large garden, you are its guardian, and they don't move at 100 miles an hour, unless they're on a riverbank, and then you really have to work hard to get rid of them. But you do have to remove them from your land if you can, because the aim or the goal is to create as strong an ecosystem as possible, support as many creatures as possible, and the plants that will take over are not going to do that. They're not going to allow you to do that. Now, certain ones like Japanese knotweed, they seem to survive quite well unless you attack them, and then they explode. They seem to survive quite well in a community, but it depends. Every situation is different. I can't prescribe what to do. It's not a one-size-fits-all answer. But I do know there's no chemicals allowed in any ARK. That time is gone. That has to stop. They create more problems than they solve. So there's a good bit of work involved, but not really. It's like lazy gardening for most people. Stick up a sign and let it go completely wild. It'll be full of brambles and thorny trees before you know it. And it'll be full of all sorts of creatures, which is absolutely wonderful.
So going back to what you said about your garden, and it did start a trend for more wild gardens. So do you think things have improved since you did your garden on the whole, or even on the show garden circuit? Are you confident that we're moving in the right direction?
I think it is moving in the right direction. You see, the problem is it's an industry. Like all of the industries, like the agricultural industry, it has to change. No industry likes change. So it either does something like it becomes entrenched, which I think has become a little bit. It's not fast enough, basically. I mean, 5,000 acres of Ireland's peat lands are being dug up every single year just to support England's peat needs in their gardens alone. Never mind what we're doing to burn it for electricity over here. And the peatlands, they hold more carbon than rainforests, But it's not changing as fast as it needs to. And there's huge opportunities in it to step back and, morph into something else. And I don't know what they are, because I think the whole idea of constant change and constant growth and constant profits, that all has to go. And nobody wants to hear that, I think surviving on the planet is slightly more important than creating a profitable gardening business. So it has to start changing from the ground up. And I do think it's not as simple as this. Like, we do have to have some kind of a living wage to allow people not to be constantly enslaved and stressed and doing things that they know are damaging the earth because they don't have any choice. They feel they don't have any choice. They're stuck having to just pay the bills. They can't think about anything else. Do you know what I mean? So there's so many people that are in that situation. I mean, I'm not too far off that situation. I struggle. I'm on my own with kids, and it's not easy, but I just can't continue to do what I was doing anymore. So I have to figure something else out. I think we all have to start looking at things like that. It's just not straightforward anymore. So I don't know. I don't think it's changing fast enough.
I was listening to you on another podcast, and you very matter of fact said magic is real, which for some people will come as a surprise that you kind of said that. How does magic manifest in gardens? Okay, well, it's just an observation of mine. I'm kind of afraid to say these things because people just automatically lump you in with all the kind of self-help gurus
that are going around talking about intention